The wedding was perfect. Flowers, music, and smiling guests. But when little Kimmy grabbed the microphone, the room fell silent. Her big, teary eyes looked around before she spoke. "Dad did that to me again and again." The bride froze. The guests gasped. And in that moment, the entire wedding changed forever. Before continuing this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel for daily upcoming stories notification. Let's begin the story. The Johnson-Carter wedding was the kind of event people talked about for years. The grand ballroom of the Langston estate in Atlanta shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, the air filled with the scent of fresh roses and expensive perfume. Guests dressed in designer suits and glittering gowns sipped champagne, their laughter and conversation weaving into the soft melodies of a live jazz band. At the center of it all stood Amara Johnson, 28, radiant in her ivory wedding gown. A top corporate lawyer, she had built a reputation for being fierce, intelligent, and unshakable. Her dark skin glowed against the delicate lace of her dress, and her thick, coiled hair was pulled into an elegant updo, revealing diamond-studded earrings, one of many lavish gifts from her new husband, Marcus Carter. Marcus was the picture of charm, a 32-year-old entrepreneur with a magnetic presence. His tailored tuxedo accentuated his tall, athletic frame, and his confident smile could melt even the coldest heart. As he wrapped his arms around Amara during their first dance, guests whispered about how perfect they looked together, the power couple everyone admired. But not everyone was celebrating. 16-year-old Kimmy Johnson, Amara's younger sister, sat stiffly at the head table, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. Unlike her older sister, who thrived in the spotlight, Kimmy had always been quiet, reserved. Her deep brown eyes held a sadness that didn't belong at a wedding, and her petite frame looked almost fragile in her lavender bridesmaid dress. Throughout the night, Amara noticed Kimmy's unease. Her forced smiles, her distant stares, the way she flinched when their father, Elijah Johnson, approached. Elijah was a man of power, a respected pastor, a community leader, a man people turned to for guidance. Dressed in an impeccable navy blue suit, he walked through the crowd with an air of authority, greeting guests with a firm handshake and a warm practiced smile. No one questioned his character. No one saw the monster beneath. But Amara saw something. She saw the way Kimmy avoided his gaze, the way her hands trembled when he placed a hand on her shoulder. Something was wrong. As the night stretched on, Amara pulled Kimmy aside into a quiet hallway, away from the music and flashing cameras. "Are you okay?" Amara asked gently, tucking a loose curl behind Kimmy's ear. "You've been acting strange all night." Kimmy hesitated, her throat tightening. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear herself think. She wanted to say nothing, to shake her head and go back to pretending, but she couldn't. Not anymore. Her voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Dad did that to me again and again." Silence. Amara froze, her breath catching in her throat. The words slammed into her like a truck, shattering the world she thought she knew. What did you just say?" she asked, her voice shaking. Tears spilled down Kimmy's cheeks. He hurt me, for years, and nobody believed me." A wave of nausea rolled through Amara. This couldn't be real. Not their father, not Elijah Johnson, the man who preached about family and faith every Sunday. But looking into Kimmy's tear-streaked face, Amara knew. This was real. Her stomach twisted with rage, disgust, heartbreak. How had she not seen it? How had she not protected her sister? Without another word, Amara pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "This is Amara Carter," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I need the police at Langston Estate immediately. My father is a child abuser." The celebration came to a screeching halt. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every second. The guests, once laughing and dancing, now stood frozen, eyes wide with confusion as police officers swarmed into the ballroom. Elijah's face twisted in shock as officers approached him. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice still carrying the authority of a man who had never been questioned. A female officer stepped forward. Elijah Johnson, you are under arrest for sexual assault and child endangerment. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Deborah Johnson, their mother, clutched her chest. No! This must be a mistake! She cried, her voice thick with denial. Amara held Kimmy close as their father was handcuffed. The mask Elijah had worn for years cracked, and for the first time, the world saw the monster beneath. The media swarmed the scene, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. The once perfect wedding had turned into a crime scene, and Amara knew this was just the beginning. The aftermath of Elijah Johnson's arrest unfolded like a nightmare. The once elegant ballroom of the Langston estate had turned into chaos. Guests whispered in hushed tones, some clutching their pearls in disbelief. Others pulled out their phones, recording as the police escorted Elijah through the grand doors, his hands cuffed behind his back. Deborah Johnson, his wife, stood frozen, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled, her face twisted in horror. This is a mistake, she kept repeating, gripping Amara's arm so tightly that her nails dug into her daughter's skin. Tell them, Amara. Tell them this isn't true. Amara yanked her arm away. Her whole body trembled, not just with shock, but with rage. Kimmy wouldn't lie about this, she said through gritted teeth, and neither would I. Deborah's eyes flashed with something unreadable. Fear, maybe? Guilt? But before she could respond, a reporter shoved a microphone into Amara's face. Mrs. Carter, can you confirm why your father was arrested at your wedding? More reporters closed in, their cameras blinding. Amara took a deep breath, wrapping a protective arm around Kimmy. No comment. She pushed through the crowd, pulling her sister along, Marcus right behind them. They barely made it to the limousine before more cameras flashed, more questions screamed at them. As the car sped away, silence settled inside. Amara turned to Kimmy, who sat curled up against the door, her hands wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Kimmy, Amara whispered, reaching for her. I'm so sorry. Kimmy didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared out the window, her face blank, hollow. Amara had never hated her father more than in that moment. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Pastor Elijah Johnson arrested at daughter's wedding on child abuse charges. Scandal rocks prominent Atlanta church. Bride calls 911 on her own father. Was he leading a double life? News anchors dissected every detail. Social media exploded with reactions. Amara's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her law firm sent a polite but firm message. Take a leave of absence until this blows over. Marcus tried to shield her from the worst of it, but Amara could see the tension in his face. He had built his business on networking, on his reputation. And now, people were whispering behind his back, treating him like a man tainted by association. Are you regretting marrying me already? Amara asked one night, exhaustion heavy in her voice. Marcus sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Of course not. But this is a lot, Amara. She understood what he wasn't saying. What if this scandal ruined them? But she didn't care about that. Not now. The only thing that mattered was Kimmy and finding out the whole truth. Deborah refused to believe it. I won't let you destroy this family, she snapped when Amara and Kimmy arrived at her house. Kimmy flinched at the sharpness in her mother's voice. I'm not the one who destroyed it, she whispered. Deborah's lips thinned. Do you have any idea what you've done? Your father? He's a monster, Amara cut in. And you're protecting him? Deborah's face crumbled. I'm protecting us, Amara. Do you know what the church is saying? What our community thinks of us? Amara let out a bitter laugh. I don't give a damn what they think. Deborah looked between her daughters, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. You think I didn't know? She whispered suddenly, voice barely audible. Silence. Kimmy sucked in a sharp breath. Amara's stomach twisted. Deborah squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. I suspected, but I told myself it wasn't true. I told myself Elijah would never... Kimmy bolted from the room. Amara wanted to scream. Her mother had known, and she had done nothing. You let this happen, she said, her voice shaking with fury. To your own daughter. Tears streamed down Deborah's face. I was scared. You should have been scared for her. Amara turned and walked away. She had heard enough. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. Because if Elijah had done this to Kimmy, how many others were out there? Amara had always thought of herself as fearless. She had gone head-to-head with ruthless corporate executives in high-stakes legal battles. She had built a career proving that no one was untouchable. But nothing had ever prepared her for this. She sat at her desk, her laptop open, staring at an empty search bar. Where do you even start investigating your own father? Kimmy was still silent, barely eating, barely sleeping. She spent most of her time in Amara and Marcus's guest room, curled up with her hoodie pulled over her head, shutting out the world. Amara needed answers. She needed to understand how deep this went, and she had a feeling her father's secrets were buried far deeper than anyone realized. She hesitated for a moment, then typed into the search bar, Pastor Elijah Johnson abuse accusations. At first, nothing came up, just articles about his arrest from the wedding, church fundraisers, and photos of him shaking hands with politicians. A man loved by his community, a man trusted. And then, something strange, a Reddit post from 5 years ago. Does anyone know if Pastor Elijah Johnson from Greater Light Baptist Church is legit? Something about him feels off. Amara's pulse quickened. She clicked on the post. The comments were vague. People speculating about church money, whispers of inappropriate behavior, but nothing solid. Then one comment stood out. If y'all knew what happened to my cousin, you wouldn't be calling him pastor anything. But people like him always get away with it. That church protects him. The account was anonymous. The post was 5 years old. Amara's hands trembled as she sent a private message anyway. I need to know what you meant. Please, if you have information, contact me. She didn't expect a response. But if there was one victim out there, there were more. Amara had avoided going back to her parents' church since she was a teenager. But now, standing in the parking lot of Greater Light Baptist Church, she felt like she was about to walk into the lion's den. Marcus had insisted on coming with her. I don't like you doing this alone, he had said that morning. Now as they stepped into the church lobby, eyes turned toward them, not with warmth, but with suspicion. The church's assistant pastor, Reverend Charles Green, a stocky man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair, met them at the entrance. Amara, he said cautiously, this isn't a good time. Why? She asked. Because my father isn't here to keep the story under control? His face tightened. Elijah was a pillar of this church. Amara folded her arms. Was he? Or was he just a man you all protected? A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Reverend Green sighed and gestured for them to follow him into his office. I don't know what you think you're going to find, Amara, he said, sitting behind his massive wooden desk. But you should be careful. Some things are better left alone. Marcus bristled. Are you threatening her? Reverend Green held up a hand. No threats, just a warning. This church has done a lot of good. A scandal like this? It's not a scandal, Amara snapped. It's the truth. Reverend Green's jaw clenched, and in that moment, she saw it. He knew. He had always known. You knew, didn't you? She whispered. You knew what he was. Reverend Green looked away. I'm sorry, Amara. She clenched her fists. Did you cover it up? He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. Marcus took Amara's hand. Come on, babe. We're done here. No, Amara thought. We're just getting started. That night, just as Amara was about to close her laptop, a notification popped up. A reply to her message on Reddit. I don't know you, but if you're really serious about taking him down, meet me tomorrow at 5 p.m. Lennox Coffee House. I'll tell you what I know. No name, no details. But Amara knew one thing. Someone out there had the truth, and she was going to find it. The next day, Amara sat in Lennox Coffee House, her fingers wrapped around a cup of black coffee she had no intention of drinking. Her eyes darted around the cafe, scanning the faces of strangers. Who was she waiting for? A former church member? A survivor? Someone who had been silenced? Marcus had wanted to come, but Amara had convinced him to stay back. This was her fight. At exactly 5 p.m., the door chimed and a woman stepped inside. She was in her late 30s, her caramel-colored skin worn with stress, her dark brown eyes flickering with hesitation. She wore a navy blue blazer, her curly hair pulled into a tight bun. Amara recognized her instantly, Natasha Bennett. She had been a Sunday school teacher at Greater Light Baptist Church when Amara was a teenager, but after a while she had just disappeared. Natasha spotted Amara and hesitated before walking over. She slid into the seat across from her, folding her hands on the table. "You're Elijah's daughter," she said quietly. Amara nodded. "And you knew something about him, didn't you?" Natasha exhaled sharply. "More than I ever wanted to." Natasha glanced around nervously before she spoke. "I was 23 when I started working at the church," she began. "Young, excited. I really believed in Pastor Elijah's message." Amara stayed silent, letting her talk. "But after a year, I started noticing things. Girls in the youth group who suddenly stopped coming to church. Mothers who seemed afraid to be alone with him. And then one day, a girl came to me in tears. She told me that Pastor Elijah had..." Natasha's voice cracked. She swallowed hard. "She told me he had been touching her." For months, Amara's stomach twisted. "What did you do?" "I went to Reverend Green," Natasha said bitterly. "I thought he'd help. Instead, he told me I was mistaken. He said the girl was troubled, that she had misunderstood Pastor Elijah's love for his congregation." A wave of nausea rolled through Amara. They had known. "I didn't listen," Natasha continued. "I went to the girl's mother. She was terrified but agreed to press charges. We were ready to take it to the police." She paused, her hands clenching into fists. "But then suddenly the girl's mother backed out. She stopped answering my calls. They moved away without telling anyone." Amara frowned. "You think the church threatened her?" Natasha let out a bitter laugh. "I don't think. I know. A few weeks later, I got a visit from a couple of men in suits, church elders. They told me I was stirring up trouble and that it would be best if I resigned." "And you did? What choice did I have?" Natasha's voice was tight with pain. "I was a nobody. They were powerful. I left Atlanta the next week." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Amara spoke. "Do you know where the girl is now?" Natasha shook her head. "Number. But if you want the truth, you need to look at church finances. They've been paying people off for years." Amara's pulse quickened. "Do you have proof?" Natasha hesitated, then reached into her purse, pulling out a flash drive. She slid it across the table. "I saved some things before I left," she said. "Bank statements, large withdrawals from the church account that don't make sense." Amara stared at the tiny device. This wasn't just about Kimmy anymore. Her father had hurt more people, and the church had helped him cover it up. She closed her fingers around the flash drive. "Thank you," Natasha gave her a sad smile. "Take him down." That night, Amara sat in her home office, her laptop glowing in the dim light. She inserted the flash drive, heart pounding. Marcus leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You've barely said a word since you got home. What's on that thing?" Amara exhaled. "Receipts." The files contained hundreds of bank statements. Money had been pulled from the church's accounts in large sums. $50,000 here, $100,000 there. Often around the same time certain families had moved away. "Hush money." Marcus let out a low whistle. "Damn." Amara clicked through the files until she found something even worse. A list of names. She didn't recognize all of them, but one stood out. Tasha Carter. Amara's blood ran cold. Tasha Carter was Kimmy's best friend. Her mind reeled. Could it be? Was Tasha another victim? And if she was, would she be willing to talk? Amara sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her phone. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through her contacts, stopping at a familiar name. Tasha Carter. She had known Tasha since she was a child. She was Kimmy's best friend, practically family. If her name was on that list, it meant her father had hurt her too. She took a deep breath and pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. "Hello?" Tasha's voice was soft, hesitant. Amara swallowed. "Hey, Tash, it's Amara." Silence, then a small, cautious response. Hey, I need to ask you something, Amara said carefully. Can we meet? Tasha hesitated. Is this about Kimmy? In a way, yes. Another pause. Then finally, okay, the park near my house. 30 minutes. Tasha sat on a wooden bench, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her once bright brown eyes were guarded, her face pale. Amara sat beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Tasha sighed. I know why you're here. Amara's throat tightened. Tasha, your name was on a list I found. A church document. Tasha let out a hollow laugh. A list? What, like some kind of roster of girls he hurt? Amara's stomach twisted. It was tied to money. Church payouts. I think they were paying off families to stay quiet. Tasha's jaw clenched. She looked away, her hands gripping her knees. Yeah, they tried. Amara's breath caught. So it's true? Tasha exhaled, shaking her head. I never wanted to talk about it. Not to Kimmy. Not to anyone. Her voice broke. He started when I was 13. He'd find excuses to get me alone. Church retreats, late-night Bible studies. I didn't even understand what was happening at first. Amara reached for her hand, but Tasha flinched. My mom figured it out, she continued. She tried to fight it, but then the church. They sent people. They told her they'd ruin us if we spoke out. And when she still wouldn't back down, they wrote a check. Amara's stomach churned with disgust. And she took it? Tasha's lips trembled. She had no choice. We were broke, and she was scared. Amara's heart ached. She had always known the church was powerful, but this? They had been silencing victims for years. Tasha, she whispered, will you testify? Tasha stiffened. Testify? My father's going to trial. We need more voices. If we show that there were others, they can't brush it off as just Kimmy's word against his. Tasha shook her head. I can't. I can't go through that. I barely survived the first time. Amara felt the sting of disappointment, but she also understood. Tasha had spent years trying to bury this, to survive. Still, she couldn't let this go. If you change your mind, she said gently, I'll be here. Tasha nodded, but her eyes were filled with fear. And Amara knew there were more victims out there, and not all of them would be willing to speak. When Amara got home, Marcus was waiting. What did she say? He asked. She confirmed it, Amara murmured, sinking onto the couch. It wasn't just Kimmy. My father's been doing this for years, and the church has been covering it up. Marcus exhaled sharply. Jesus. A knock at the door interrupted them. Amara frowned and got up. She opened it to find her mother, Deborah Johnson, standing on the porch. Her mother's normally perfect hair was unkempt, and her eyes were red-rimmed. We need to talk, Deborah said softly. Amara stepped aside, letting her in. Marcus stayed close, his arms crossed. Deborah sat down, wringing her hands. Amara, I know what you're doing. Amara's jaw tightened. Good. Then you know I'm not stopping. Deborah let out a shaky breath. Please, you don't understand. Then explain it to me, Amara shot back. Explain how you could be married to him and not know. Her mother flinched, and then she broke. Tears slipped down her face as she whispered, because I did know. The words punched the air from Amara's lungs. Deborah buried her face in her hands. I knew, not everything, but I knew something was wrong. I saw things, little things. I caught him alone with young girls too many times. I heard the rumors. She sniffled. And when I confronted him about it, he told me it was nonsense, that people were just trying to tear him down. And you believed him? Amara whispered, voice trembling. I wanted to. Deborah wiped her eyes. But then, a mother came to me. She told me she was going to the police. She wanted my help. And I told her she was wrong. Amara clenched her fists. You protected him. Deborah let out a sob. I was scared, Amara. He was my husband. I didn't know what to do. Amara's blood boiled. You let him hurt Kimmy. Deborah shook her head. I swear to you, I didn't know about Kimmy. If I had, her voice broke. I would have done something. But would she? Amara stood, her entire body trembling. "Get out! Amara! Get out!" Deborah flinched but stood. She lingered for a moment, then whispered, "I'm sorry." Then she was gone. Amara's chest heaved. She felt Marcus's arms wrap around her, but she barely registered it. Her own mother had betrayed them, and she had to make sure Elijah never hurt anyone again. Amara barely slept that night. Her mother's words haunted her. "I knew." She wanted to scream, to punch something, but there was no time for anger. She had a case to build. By morning, she was on her laptop, piecing together the evidence. Natasha's files, Tasha's story, Kimmy's testimony. But it wasn't enough. They needed more, and they needed it fast. That afternoon, Amara's office door swung open. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Expecting someone?" "No," Amara frowned. A woman stepped in, tall, striking, with sharp cheekbones and piercing dark eyes. She wore a fitted gray suit, her posture screaming authority. "I'm Victoria Langston," she said coolly, extending a card. "Senior Counsel for Greater Light Baptist Church." Amara's blood ran cold. "You're their lawyer," she stated. Victoria nodded. "And I'm here to offer a deal." Amara crossed her arms. "A deal?" Victoria sat down, her expression unreadable. "The church is willing to settle. A private arrangement, a generous financial package for Kimmy, in exchange for dropping all charges." Marcus scoffed. "You think this is about money?" Victoria didn't blink. "This is about discretion. A messy trial benefits no one." Amara stared at her. "Number A, messy trial benefits you." Victoria's eyes darkened. "Be reasonable, Ms. Johnson." Amara leaned forward. "Let me be clear. There is no deal. My father is going to face justice. And if your church had any integrity, you'd be helping us, not covering for him." Victoria sighed as if disappointed. She stood, adjusting her blazer. "I hoped you'd be pragmatic, but if you insist on war, the church will fight back." She turned to leave, then paused. "I suggest you reconsider, for your sister's sake." Amara's stomach twisted. Was that a threat? The door clicked shut behind her. Marcus exhaled sharply. "That was some mafia-level intimidation." Amara clenched her fists. "They're scared. That means we're close to the truth." But she knew one thing. The church wasn't going to play fair. That night, Amara got an anonymous text. "Meet me at the old church parking lot, 11 p.m. Come alone." She stared at the message. Was it a trap? A whistleblower? Marcus was against it. It's too dangerous. But Amara knew she had to go. This could be her only chance to get inside information. At 11 p.m., she parked her car near the abandoned church lot. The night was quiet, the streetlights flickering. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Reverend Green, the same man who had dismissed Natasha years ago. Amara tensed. "Why are you here?" Green glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't be, but you need to listen." "Then talk." He exhaled. "They're coming after you, Amara. The church is powerful. They have connections. If you push this, they will ruin you." Amara's heart pounded. "Are you warning me or threatening me?" Green shook his head. He hesitated. "I knew things weren't right. I should have done something years ago. But now, I can't protect you. They want this case buried." Amara's blood boiled. "If you really regret it, then testify. Tell the court how they covered this up." Green hesitated. Then he whispered, "I have a family, Amara." "Coward." She stepped closer. "You're a man of God. If you don't speak up, you're just as guilty as them." Green's face twisted in pain, but he said nothing. Amara turned to leave. Before she reached her car, Green called out, "Watch your back." Then he disappeared into the night. The next morning, Amara's phone exploded with notifications. She opened one. Breaking. Amara Johnson, bride who called 911 on her wedding day, faces defamation lawsuit from church. Her stomach dropped. Marcus ran in, holding his phone. "They're suing you." The church was going to destroy her, and she wasn't sure she could stop them. Amara sat in front of the TV staring at the news. Amara Johnson, The bride who made headlines for calling 911 on her wedding day is now being sued for defamation by Greater Light Baptist Church. The lawsuit claims she is spreading false allegations against her father, Pastor Elijah Johnson, and damaging the church's reputation. The church's senior counsel, Victoria Langston, issued a statement denying any wrongdoing. The screen cut to Victoria, standing confidently before a line of reporters. Ms. Johnson's accusations are completely baseless. We will not allow her to slander a respected institution. The church stands by Pastor Elijah Johnson. Amara's hands curled into fists. They were trying to silence her. Marcus turned off the TV. This is their play. Tie you up in legal battles, drain your resources, and make you look like the villain. Amara exhaled sharply. They're scared. Yeah, but they're also dangerous. Marcus sat beside her. We need to fight this smart. She nodded. If the church thought a lawsuit would scare her off, they had no idea who they were dealing with. That evening, Amara found Kimmy curled up on the couch, knees tucked to her chest. Her face was pale, her breathing ragged. Kimmy? Amara rushed over. What's wrong? Kimmy shook her head rapidly, her whole body trembling. I saw it. The news. The comments. Amara grabbed her phone. Online, people were calling Kimmy a liar, saying she was making everything up for attention. This girl is ruining her own father's life. Disgusting. Gold diggers, both of them. That man gave his life to God. Now these women are trying to destroy him. Amara's chest tightened. Don't look at this, Kimmy. Tears rolled down Kimmy's face. They don't believe me. No one believes me. Amara pulled her into a hug. I believe you. Marcus believes you, and the truth will come out. Kimmy sobbed against her shoulder. What if they win? What if he walks free? Amara's jaw clenched. Then we fight harder. She knew now this wasn't just about justice. This was a war, and she wasn't backing down. The next morning, Amara's office phone rang. Ms. Johnson, my name is Lisa Bennett. I used to work as an accountant for Greater Light Baptist Church. Amara's heart pounded. Okay, Lisa took a deep breath. I think I can help you, but we need to meet, in private. Amara didn't hesitate. Tell me where. Lisa was in her late 40s with tired blue eyes and a nervous demeanor. She clutched a folder tightly, her hands shaking. I was in charge of church finances for years, she said. I saw the hush money. I processed the payments to families. Amara leaned in. You're saying you have proof? Lisa nodded. Records, wire transfers, cash withdrawals that were never accounted for. She slid the folder across the table. Amara opened it. Her stomach dropped. There it was. Bank transactions, payouts, a direct paper trail leading back to Elijah. Lisa swallowed hard. I knew it was wrong, but when I asked questions, they told me to keep quiet. And when I didn't, they fired me. Amara looked up. Lisa, this could help put Elijah away forever. Will you testify? Lisa hesitated. Then finally she nodded. Yes. For the first time in days, Amara felt something close to hope. They had him. But as she drove home, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. Stop now, or you'll regret it. Amara's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The church was getting desperate, and that made them even more dangerous. Amara barely had time to process Lisa Bennett's evidence before the next blow came. The morning news blared from the TV. Marcus, still half asleep, sat up when he heard the anchor's voice. New allegations have surfaced against Amara Johnson. A former law associate has come forward, claiming Ms. Johnson fabricated evidence in previous cases to win lawsuits. If true, this could call into question her credibility in the case against Pastor Elijah Johnson. Amara's blood ran cold. Marcus turned to her. What the hell is this? Before she could answer, her phone rang. It was her law firm. Amara, we need to talk. Now. An hour later, Amara sat in her boss's office. John Langley, the firm's senior partner, looked uncomfortable as he cleared his throat. Amara, this lawsuit against your father, the defamation case, it's bringing negative attention to the firm. She clenched her jaw. I'm doing what's right. John sighed. Look, we believe in justice, but we can't have our firm associated with a scandal like this. She scoffed. So you're firing me? John gave her a sympathetic look. "We're asking you to step down. For now." Amara stood slowly. "Wow. So when I was winning cases, I was an asset. But now that I'm fighting for real justice, I'm a liability?" John didn't answer. She grabbed her bag. "Screw this place." As she walked out, the whispers of her colleagues followed her. They were all watching her fall. That night, Amara sat on her couch, staring blankly at the wall. Marcus placed a hand on her knee. "Hey, we'll figure this out." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello," a disguised voice spoke. "They're setting you up." Her pulse spiked. "Who is this?" "I can't say, but they're paying people to discredit you. The firm, the news, even people from your past." Amara gripped the phone. "The church?" Silence. Then, "They're more powerful than you realize. If you keep pushing, they will destroy you." The line went dead. Amara stared at the phone. Marcus frowned. "Who was that?" Amara's mind raced. "Someone who knows the truth." The church was playing dirty, but she wasn't backing down. The next morning, Amara knocked on Kimmy's bedroom door. "Kimmy, time for breakfast." No answer. Frowning, she opened the door. The bed was empty. Her stomach dropped. "Kimmy!" she called, rushing through the house. No sign of her. Then she saw the back door slightly open. Marcus appeared behind her. "What's wrong?" "She's gone." Panic surged in Amara's chest. "She wouldn't just leave. Not without telling me." Marcus grabbed his keys. "We have to find her." Amara's mind raced with possibilities. Did she run away? Or was she taken? A sick feeling settled in her gut. This wasn't a coincidence. The church was getting desperate. And now they had Kimmy. Amara's heart pounded as she drove through the streets of Atlanta, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Marcus sat beside her, his phone pressed to his ear, calling everyone they knew. "No one's seen her," he muttered. "What if—" "Don't," Amara cut in. "She's out there. We just have to find her." Her mind was racing. Kimmy wouldn't just disappear, not after everything they had been through. Someone had to know something. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered instantly. "Kimmy?" But it wasn't her sister's voice. A distorted voice spoke. "Stop digging, Amara. Drop the case. Drop everything." Her blood ran cold. "Where is she?" Click. The line went dead. Marcus cursed. "They took her." Amara gritted her teeth. "Then we take her back." Lisa Bennett, the former church accountant, had been watching the whole thing unfold from the shadows. She knew how dangerous the church could be. She had seen the money move, the payoffs, the bribes. Now with Kimmy missing, Lisa couldn't stay silent any longer. She called Amara. "Meet me, but come alone." Amara didn't hesitate. They met at a deserted parking lot, Lisa looking over her shoulder nervously. "They have connections, Amara," Lisa whispered. "People in the police department, in the courts, even the media. That's why your name is being dragged through the mud." Amara's stomach twisted. "Where's Kimmy?" Lisa hesitated. Then she handed Amara a slip of paper. An address. Amara snatched it. "What is this?" Lisa's voice shook. "A private retreat center, owned by the church. They send people there to make them see the light." Amara's blood boiled. They were holding Kimmy hostage. Marcus didn't like the idea of Amara going alone. "It's a trap," he warned. "I don't care." Amara loaded a flashlight and a pocket knife into her bag. "I'm getting my sister back." They drove in silence to the address Lisa had given them, a secluded estate hidden behind tall iron gates. Marcus parked the car. "We do this fast, in and out." Amara nodded. Then they slipped through the shadows. Inside, Kimmy was locked in a small, windowless room. Her wrists were tied, her face streaked with tears. A woman in a church robe stood over her, speaking softly. "You've been led astray, child," the woman murmured. "Your sister is poisoning your mind, but we can cleanse you. We can help you see the truth." Kimmy shuddered. She would rather die than believe their lies. Then suddenly, crash! The door burst open. Amara and Marcus stormed in. Kimmy! Amara rushed forward, cutting the rope from her wrists. The woman gasped. You don't understand. Marcus grabbed her by the collar. Try me. The woman backed away. You'll regret this. But Amara wasn't listening. She pulled Kimmy into her arms. It's over, she whispered. I've got you. They ran out into the night before the church could stop them. As they drove away, Kimmy sobbed in Amara's arms. I thought I'd never see you again. Amara kissed her forehead. You're safe now. But she knew this was just the beginning. The church had declared war. Now Amara was going to end it. Amara wasted no time. If the church wanted a war, she would give them one. With Marcus and Kimmy by her side, she gathered every shred of evidence they had. Lisa Bennett's financial records, witness testimonies from survivors, and proof of the church's shady dealings. But she needed more. So she did something risky. She went on live television. Sitting across from a well-known news anchor, Amara took a deep breath as the cameras rolled. Ms. Johnson, why have you come forward now? The anchor asked. Amara looked directly into the camera. Because I refuse to be silenced. My father, Pastor Elijah Johnson, is not a man of God. He is a predator, and the church is protecting him. Gas rippled through the audience. Amara continued. They've bribed victims, covered up crimes, and now they're trying to destroy me for speaking out. But I won't stop until justice is served. The anchor's face was tight. That's a serious accusation. Amara nodded. I have proof. Then she pulled out Lisa's files, displaying records of payoffs, hush money, and missing church funds. The broadcast went viral within hours. The church had spent years keeping its secrets buried. Now the world was watching. As expected, the church didn't take the exposure lightly. Within 24 hours, Amara was hit with a lawsuit for defamation. News outlets began reporting that she was mentally unstable. Old colleagues from her law firm were suddenly speaking out against her. And then, Kimmy received a death threat. A letter slipped under their door. Stay quiet or you won't live to see the trial. Marcus grabbed Amara's shoulders. This is getting dangerous. But Amara's rage burned hotter than her fear. They're scared, she said, and that means we're winning. The courtroom was packed. The media swarmed outside. Amara sat beside her lawyer as the case against Elijah Johnson finally began. The prosecution presented Lisa's financial evidence, testimonies from victims, and medical reports from Kimmy and others who had suffered at Elijah's hands. Then it was time for the defense. The church had hired the best lawyers money could buy. They painted Kimmy as a troubled teenager seeking attention. They called Amara a bitter daughter with a vendetta. And then they brought Deborah Johnson, Amara's mother, to the stand. Amara's breath caught as her mother walked up, hands shaking. Deborah looked at the defense lawyer, then at Amara. She took a deep breath and said the words that changed everything. I knew. Gas filled the courtroom. Tears ran down Deborah's face. I knew what Elijah was doing. I was too afraid to stop him, and I will never forgive myself. The church's case crumbled. Elijah Johnson's mask was shattered, and the jury saw him for what he truly was. The verdict was swift, guilty. Elijah Johnson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The church, once untouchable, fell into scandal. Donations dried up. Followers abandoned them. Victoria Langston, their ruthless lawyer, resigned. Justice had been served. Months later, Amara stood outside a new building, a non-profit organization she had founded to help survivors of abuse. Kimmy stood beside her, stronger than ever. Are you ready? Amara smiled. More than ever. As she stepped inside, she knew their fight wasn't over, but they had won this battle, and that was enough. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe for more daily stories that will keep you entertained. See you in the next one.